ArcheMedX video and podcast interview series. Our guest today is Krystyna Kowalczyk, CEO and President at Onco Bay Clinical. Welcome to our video and podcast, Krystyna.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to be here and glad to have this opportunity to chat a bit.
Likewise. Can you start by just giving our audience a sense of your background?
Of course. So I have been in the industry for about 28 years, maybe a little bit longer, although I like to fudge that number. Have started out really doing some bench work, drug device combination work, looking at transdermal drug delivery, but very quickly moved into the service industry, CRO space, and had an opportunity to take some of those transdermal products into people and realized there was a whole industry here. Like many people in this industry, I started out in a very traditional way, being a CRA, a project manager, worked my way up through leadership roles, and had the opportunity then to found a couple of companies. So I'm now in one group that I founded, Onco Bay Clinical, and really pleased to be able to make an impact in the research space.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. It seems like an exciting background and an exciting goal moving forward. So maybe you can start by really setting the stage for us around what are some of the priority initiatives that Onco Bay is focused on right now.
I would love to, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it, because we certainly are excited about it every day. As a CRO, we really did take some time to think about what initiatives we wanted to approach and how we wanted to do that. We are a partner with Moffitt Cancer Center, so it gives us a very interesting foundation to work from. And as we started, we really thought about how has cancer research changed today? What things are unique, what's different from 4 or 5 years ago, and how do we build an infrastructure that really allows us to be impactful? For us, it really was centered around 3 tenets. And so when I think about who we are and the changes we want to make and where we want to impact, it's 3 tenets. The first is around patients, really understanding that in cancer care today, patients deserve opportunity. There are more standard of care medicines that are very exciting, but the innovations that are coming out really do create patient opportunities and opportunities for patients with rare diseases, with marker diseases, because we are thinking about cancer care differently. It's no longer one disease. It is a collection of diseases that we lump under this title of cancer. So we as an organization thought about how do we help make a difference to patients today? And that really meant going out to where patients are. It meant going into the community and creating opportunity, bringing out diversity in trials. And so for us, it was about building out 2 separate site communities. We have one that's centered around immunotherapy, looking at tertiary cancer centers that really service the majority of patients in this country. The second was around cellular therapy, very exciting innovations today, really innovative therapies that can be very impactful, but very limited in their access. And so we built out a second community around hospital-based sites and tried to really grow the opportunity for patients to be able to tap into those therapies and tap into the research that's happening. The second thing we've done is really think about, because of the complexity of these trials, think about the kind of expertise that needed to come to the table. So certainly for us as a company, we've looked at the staff that we bring on and make sure that we really look at highly skilled, highly educated staff that also have a great level of experience at a variety of levels. But beyond that, we've also thought about our relationships with researchers. Certainly through our partnership with Moffitt Cancer Center, we have the opportunity to tap into that excellence and that staff. But beyond that, we've really looked at other academic centers that are thought leaders in a variety of different indications and therapeutics to make sure that we build those relationships and in every part of our operational process, bring in that excellence so we can deliver the optimal opportunities for our sponsors and then ultimately for patients. The last is around technology. And all of us live in a COVID current world where there really is a rethinking of what normal looks like. For the clinical trial industry, this is maybe the most current driver of change, but things have been changing for quite some time. Trials have become more complex. There are more of them. We have more people that we have to access, and it's forced us to rethink how we work. So when you put those 2 together, we really thought about the kinds of tools and technologies that would be meaningful and important to look at creating a differentiation and creating opportunity. So for us, it was everything from tools that allowed us to pull information straight from a patient medical record into a case report form after they agreed to go on a trial, through integrating external data sets, so pulling all the data that's collected from labs or from a physician's office or from an imaging center, all those different groups, pulling that all together, and then creating all sorts of data displays. And what that means is that we can, without ever going to a site, really understand information in context and really make a difference. And once we understood that information with these displays, we looked at tools that allowed this kind of virtual interaction, similar to what we're doing today. It's a very meaningful conversation that doesn't have to be done in person. So we use tools like Google Glasses, for example, where we can really interact with our sites, interact with patients, and create opportunity to engage and create excellence without physically having to be there. And it's something that we're very, very excited about.
Yeah, that's great, Krystyna. Thanks for sharing all that. I can certainly feel the passion and the focus to make a difference in this space. So I think we have a lot of good things to talk about today. It's near and dear to my heart, of course, as a learning platform that really focuses on, predicting and improving performance and mitigating risk and things like that. Can you speak a little bit more about, despite going out and getting experienced and talented staff, how do you prepare them for the modern complexities of an oncology trial?
What a great question, because we as an industry tend to be very habitual, and we do things because we've always done them that way. And we hear so much talk about risk and risk mitigation and risk management and preparedness, but we haven't done a great job defining exactly how we implement that. And those are so critical to data quality and ultimately to the ability to take a drug to market. For us, it's been really about analytics. It's been about initially working through some tools that allow us to define risk, allow us to understand that, be predictive, which I think is a place we're very aligned, right? This idea of predictive risk. To have very specific methodologies about how you react to anything that then is triggered by your risk matrix. And then, of course, to use analytics to continue to evaluate and reevaluate the progress that you're taking, and if you need to readdress all of those risk parameters. But assessing data in real time is probably the key. It is too easy to collect data and let it become a serial behavior, step 1, step 2, step 3. And for us, being able to look at information in real time, look at performance in real time, and similar to, I think, a lot of what you think about is how do you really assess quality, how do you assess comprehension, how do you assess progress, trends in real time, and then react to them. Those are the kinds of things that matter. And for us, it really is both a technology solution as well as a training solution. People have to understand how to use the materials they have. We can collect risk factors all day long. If no one knows what to do with that data, it becomes a meaningless exercise. So really helping to educate and showing people how to use that information, I think, has been key. For us, it's been about infrastructure and about developing the tools that allow us to be successful trying to make some of those assessments.
Yeah, you make such a great point that I've experienced a bunch of, maybe it's just in my nature, but I just love to develop the tools and sort of roll up the data and, provide these insights. But if I don't spend an equal amount of time on preparing the user of that data to actually take a decision or move something forward based on the data, maybe they don't get as excited about the data as I do. Yeah, I think those are really key points about preparing people and also making sure they know what to do with the data and letting go of that habitual traditional mindset of moving from, batch or serial, like you talked about, to continuous, right? It's happening in real time and we can do things in the moment. So I think that's all really great. At this point, like as you've gone and you've implemented some of these new technologies and focused on these pillars, are there any sort of things you've tried that you really had success with and you could see maybe those being sticky in other types of clinical research, right? Because in some ways, oncology gets the opportunity to push yourselves because of the serious nature and because of the complexity. But do you see any places where the rest of the market should adopt some of these practices?
So that's a really interesting question. And I think the answer is yes. The first is in the site preparedness. So as I talk about what we've done in the site network, this whole idea of site preparedness. In building a site network, we have done things like do CDAs in advance, do master services in advance, provide training platforms in advance, training infrastructure, not platforms, collect documents in advance, understand a site's capabilities in advance. So this idea of being prepared and ready really allows us to move forward with sites quickly. And whether this is in research or really in any other kind of industry, this idea of investing early and really understanding what the important indicators of success are, I think is really important. And we hesitate. I think as humans, we hesitate. Do we want to invest? Do we want to put money in this thing? I'll just wait and see what happens. And we all know from experience, we teach our children, be ready, be prepared, do your homework. But it's hard to do that as a grown-up. And I think that is sort of the first thing that's really, really important. I think the second is really around turnkey solutions. Most of the technology we have is readily available. There are tools out there that people purchase and integrate all the time, but they're done to solve discrete and distinct challenges. And the reality is when you put those tools together and rethink the entire paradigm, each of those tools become more impactful. So 1 + 1 now equals 3 because you've melded these tools appropriately. And so this idea of not thinking about risk, not thinking about operations as stopgap measures, not having everything be a stopgap, but really thinking about turnkey solutions end to end, I think is really important. I talked a little about our technology. We've fit things together in ways that are unique. We've gotten vendors to work together that have never worked together before because they each have very distinct perspectives on their piece of the pie. And so putting them together, I think, has had them realize that perhaps there are ways that they can expand their impact. And I think that's true across the board. I think that's true in not just clinical trials, right, but any business to really consider change management as a spectrum and not just as a stopgap.
Oh yeah, excellent point. I always focus a lot on this idea of creating the conversations and relationships necessary to move past how to implement a new technology within an existing process, but rather, what are the opportunities in our process because of this new technology? And that seems so like kind of maybe common sense, but I don't know if you agree, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be the norm when I'm in discussions or meetings, right? It takes a unique thinker to say, wait, how can we really utilize this technology? It sounds like you guys are doing that.
Well, there's a bit of angst there. People have a job and a position description and a title and a list of responsibilities that they cover. And so when you bring in new technology and you say, let's talk about where this can impact and what it can do, oftentimes it takes things off people's list. And so then the human fear of what happens to me can become overwhelming. And I think we have to be respectful of that. It's a real fear. I think we as leaders need to do a better job than articulating, if you change A, it now creates B. So, I think that I totally agree. I think as you bring in these new ideas and these new concepts and new methodologies, it's important to then change and to articulate the change isn't just a negative. We're not just replacing people with technology. We're creating new opportunity. We're creating new roles. We're creating new titles. We're creating an entire new business model. And it's really upon us to help people have that vision, see that vision, and embrace it so that we can really drive true change.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And then linking that to the value you can bring to your patient populations, I think can sometimes make that even easier, right? Because it's easy to get motivated when the changes that you're making might really improve the outcomes for those populations. So
we've got a model. You talk about making an impact and change. We have a model. We call it just-in-time enrollment, and it allows any site anywhere that's within our community to enroll a patient on a trial. And the basic idea is they find a patient that looks like they're going to qualify because of their medical history. And this is a physician that's treating that patient. And they can call us and we can get them activated for a trial in 2 weeks for that patient. So very different mindset in how you do that. And it's interesting completely, right? But it's really interesting because people say it won't work, it can't happen. The naysayers were endless. And I tell people a story. We had a patient, a lung cancer patient, that we found out about on a Thursday, end stage patient that could potentially benefit from some therapy. And the willingness of human beings to do something different because there was another human on the other end was mind-boggling. The ethics committee, it was a central ethics committee, met over the weekend. 2 lawyers got on the phone on a Saturday to work through a contract. We had a finance person get on a phone on a Sunday. That patient was treated on a Tuesday after being identified on a Thursday. And it's driven by the fact that as human beings, we really do care. And but that shows us that if we just apply that kind of energy to what we're doing, we really can change the world. And that's what we do for a living.
Oh, that's absolutely exciting. Yeah, people would hear that 2-week timeline and absolutely be a naysayer, right? Can you tell me a little bit about how the industry is reacting to this?
Sure, we're getting a general positive response. I think everyone's excited. And they're excited about this idea that you could really not just make a difference to patients, but accelerate all the timelines. Because if you can fill a clinical trial faster, you can come to an endpoint faster, you can submit that drug and it can get into patients faster. There's also some enthusiasm around diversification. There's some data that's been talked about at some of the conferences around the kinds of patients that are engaged when you do just in time. And it looks like about 30% of the patients are from traditionally underrepresented populations. Hispanic, African-American, women, we've some Alaskan Native. So it's really interesting how you're shifting the patients that you get in there. What we're finding from industry is really a bit of a mixed bag in terms of then jumping on the bandwagon. There's some very valid reasons for that. Not every trial appropriately fits in the model because sometimes if there's a lot that has to happen to a patient in terms of assessment before they can get treated. With cancer patients, you don't want them sitting untreated for a month or 2. You want them treated quickly. So there are some trial design considerations. But it's also new. So we've talked a little bit about change management and change mindset and what do you invest? And I think there's a bit of fear of does this work? What will happen? What will break? And it's interesting when we have the conversations about what will break, let's talk about it. Let's try to understand what those concerns are. It really is a set of discomforting feelings. So there certainly are things you need to think about. I think we've addressed most of them in the model. I'm sure there are things that we still need to think about, but it's interesting. I think the industry is ready to go there, but like we are in many things, there's this pause of who's going to do it first, who's going to do it whole hog first. Mm-hmm. But someday someone's going to go and run a trial and do it only just in time, and we'll enroll the whole thing in 30 days and it'll prove that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exciting. And a great point about trial design, right? You know, we often talk about what you have to be thinking about during trial design. And I think it's so much more than it used to be, right? It used to be, well, at least, make sure you focused on your endpoints and you're only collecting the data that you need. But really, it's so much more now about the actual logistics at the site and the patient experience as well. So good point.
That's right. And as you think about logistics, trial design, when you start looking at adaptive trials where the trial actually is changing as you move forward, the understanding of every team member, including the site, on what does that trial look like? What does each part look like? If you start to shift and make decisions, what does that look like? And educating everyone on what's happening next and how does that impact them is so critically important. So as we think about working proactively, so much of that is about having an infrastructure to facilitate great education and information sharing in real time, because we want to have those trials, right? We want to have trials that pivot when we learn more, that we talked about real-time information. We're looking at that information, we're making decisions, well, then we need to act on them. And to act on them, we have to be able to educate, train, observe, and drive quality with every team member that's engaged with us. and that can be complex.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in our space, similar to yourself in the reliance and use of analytics, same thing. We're using those analytics to say, okay, did they actually glean everything we hoped from the preparation and training? How do we know? Where did we have gaps or shortcomings? Where should we follow up? And again, moving away from just throwing it over the wall, hoping that they read it, hoping they consumed it, but really using analytics to guide our resource use. So it sounds, sort of a shared paradigm there.
Absolutely, because it's hard, and it's hard to know what people comprehend. We talked about how do you know you're bringing on the right staff, and it's not just bringing the right staff. It's knowing that people can look at information. So how do you assess that, right? How do you assess that someone knows how to look at a data display and glean data from that, glean actionable decision-making data from that? And it's not easy, but it's critical that people in this industry think about not just initiating training, right? Not just I'm going to give you a training and a test, but really assessing, does someone comprehend, and can they act on the information that they've received? Because otherwise it's meaningless. It's a box check, right? It goes back to everything we say we should not be doing. It's a box check. They took the test, I can prove it. Doesn't mean they know what to do with that information. And that's so key to success.
Yeah, absolutely. We are big fans of really understanding the learning behaviors of our learners, and as well as the confidence, because we believe that translates to performance in the field. And that's what really matters to these trials and to these sites and to these patients. So thank you for that. What else can you add to what goes into having a fully functional just-in-time model?
It's about preparedness, right? It's all about what you do up front. It's about upfront making sure you have documentation in place, paperwork in place, training's done. It's about all that upfront preparedness. What you and I talked about a second ago, it's investing initially to be able to be impactful later. And it's so important to invest upfront to be able to make a difference. And that difference could be life-saving in this industry. So it's really important that we all think about what is the downside benefit of an upfront investment. And that investment is often really critically important. And I think we're getting better as an industry. We're getting better at understanding that it isn't always pay as you go. It really, there is some work that has to be done up front. There's some investment that has to be made into understanding where the challenges are going to be, and to putting the tools in place to understanding where things will go wrong, to measuring that. But when we do that, the benefit on the other end is significant.
Yeah, that sounds great. So obviously you've had some great successes, and a lot of those are likely built off of, your breadth of experience and the time you've spent really focusing on these pillars and ideas and unearthing the technologies that come together. But for those out there in the audience who might try some of these pieces, what are some obstacles to expect so that they can start to then, prepare to overcome those?
I have a dinner story I tell to friends. When we first put together this technology melding, people say, wasn't that hard? And I would say, well, putting it together actually wasn't that hard, because everything today is built with AI connections. Everything's built to plug into something else. The hardest part was getting the right people around the table. And so, my advice moving forward is, this is really a change management problem. This is a problem of people seeing your vision and understanding it, and understanding that they lose nothing by coming to the table together. And so I don't think the challenges in this industry are really around, do we have the tools? Do we have the capability? There's a lot of smart people doing some amazing things. It really is about getting people comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's around getting people to stop saying, well, that's not the way we do it, right? And stop quoting things about the agency that aren't real. I think we're getting really good as an industry, I think now, understanding that the FDA does want us to be innovative. They do want us to look at diversity, right? They want us to look at risk. They want us to rethink how we behave. And so it's a matter of now really moving forward in that way. But the places these things break, it's not in the complexity of the activity. It's in the complexity of human thinking.
So yeah, let's speak a little bit about that, just a little bit more around, it sounds like in two cases, one is picking the right people, but then the other is creating the right culture. So are there any sort of tips you've gleaned along the way about how do you know somebody is really fit for this? Like, are there things that they share with you pretty early on that you're like, yes, they're going to fit, that you could share with our audience?
So I have a very dear friend who is in HR who gave me a list of HR questions, interview questions to ask that are related to behavior. And I think that's really the key. I think it's really trying to understand how someone thinks, to understand how they work under pressure, to understand how they deal with the uncomfortable. Looking at a CV is certainly meaningful, but it doesn't tell you everything you need about a person. And in fact, I found that someone with the most atypical career path is often the person I want. Someone who really has done things that you wonder, why did you do that? Why did you take that role? And if the explanation is because I could learn more, because I was afraid, because it challenged me, those are the kinds of thinkers I need. But it can be difficult. And I think that will be, for us, frankly, one of the most difficult things is finding people that really are ready for this kind of change. But it's interesting, I am finding that the generations coming up, sort of the younger employees, actually are really exciting to interview. I think they've grown up in an era where things change all the time and they're comfortable with that level of change. And so it's a really interesting, generation now that's graduating. We've heard so many things that are negative about sort of these generations coming out of school now, but I am thrilled with the kind of thinking that's coming along. It is so uncomfortable for those of us that have been around for a while. And I think it's exactly what we need, people that really challenge the status quo, that ask us why we do what we do. Really, I think the healthiest thing for this industry, and I'm excited to see where it takes us.
Yeah, that's great. It's always good to have good news, right? Both in a time of difficulty and about generations, like you say, that sometimes get labeled in a negative way. But I've had similar positive experiences where they push you to do your best thinking, right? And they push you to try new things as well as further explain the new things that you're trying. So I'm glad you're having that experience as well. So what's next for Onco Bay? What's on the horizon in the near term?
So really, we have several initiatives, right? Our minds are always running. There are 100 things we want to do. But for us, it really is, one, looking at global expansion. So we really want to make sure that our impact is not just North American. We do that through some partners, and we're continuing to foster those partnerships and are really excited about that. We've also got some internal initiatives around transforming the way patients have access to trials. So I'm going to keep it a secret for the moment, but know that we're looking to really do some things that I think will shock everyone, and we're pretty thrilled for the patients that will be impacted by it.
Well, I'll be cheering for you. I've really enjoyed the energy and the ideas behind our conversation today, and I absolutely wish you the best of luck. Where can our audience learn more about Onco Bay?
Well, certainly from our webpage, oncobay.com. Happy to have folks join us and learn more. And then we're also on all the social media platforms. It's all Onco Bay. So happy to invite visitors to come join us, follow us, and learn a little more about what we're doing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for your time today.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Conversations in Clinical Trial Readiness. If you're interested in learning more about our team, head to our website, ArcheMedX.com, or follow us on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us.